then I'll let you take over, Michael or Chuck or whoever
Sure.
wants to kick it off.
So, Chuck, you want to do it? I've got a couple notes here and that if you want me to run with that.
Go ahead and run with it. No, I don't have
Okay.
anything really to add.
Okay,
So,
sure. We're getting kind of towards the end of the year, so there's only a few things coming up, right? So once again, thank you everybody for joining tonight. These we did this one. I was thinking it was last year, but I guess we did one of these earlier this year where we do the 2 images. Tonight we just have, I think, 4 or 5 pairs of images that we'll compare. But what it is again, as we go through this, you'll see that there will be the image that is a JPEG version of the original raw image in that to start with, as far as that's kind of what comes out of camera. And then the second image is, what the maker did to it, after post-processing. And what we do here is just go through the discussion of how they got from point A to point, from the beginning image to the final image. And we like I said, we don't have that many images to go through here tonight, but I did have a chance to preview those. I downloaded them into my Lightroom, so I'll be pulling those up as we go through. And I know just in having seen some of them that came through, I'm real curious to hear the story as to how they got the final image done. So once again, we'll start that here in a few minutes. A couple other things that are coming up. We mentioned here, I guess, for those that came in here early, the November 5th, that's Saturday, is Glenn Randall has the landscape workshop. That's an all-day workshop. That's over at the Civic Center. I guess it sounds like there's still openings for that. Bruce, you said there were like 19, 20 or something like that.
Yeah, and he was up to, he limited it to 40. So yeah, there's plenty of openings.
Okay. And so that will be again that Saturday up at the Civic Center. For those that can't make that or want to do something else, I'll throw in the plug that I mentioned earlier also in that the Professional Photographers of Colorado has a conference that weekend. Thursday is a pre-conference class, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are other presentations and that going on. I say that, and then on Sunday, and I mentioned that earlier, is that for those that want to participate in or view, we have a image competition that goes on, and it's again, they use the PPA, let's say Professional Photographers of America guidelines for the judging and all that. So it's always a fun event. The entire weekend is a good time, but again, again, there is the Glenn Randall still does have openings in his class also in that, on that Saturday part of that. That image competition that I just referenced for the PPC, that's on Sunday, and that would be November the 6th. Let's see here. And really, I think, let's see here, November 16th, excuse me. Darren White, member of Lone Tree Photo Club, will be presenting on night photography. He's going to be covering pretty much all the ins and outs of night photography. For those that, I think most of us know Darren, but for those that don't, he has, for the last several years, led night photography workshops in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, other places and so forth and that, and really is a true expert at that. So really looking forward to his presentation, that again on November 16th. He's going to cover pretty much everything, including camera settings, compositions. He gets a series of multiple images, and then does stacking for noise reduction. So he'll go through that together with some of the other things that he does in post-processing. So again, that's November 16th. So that will be the next one we do there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and then and then we'll have our last competition night is the 2nd of November.
Oh, I jumped past that one. Sorry about that. Yeah, November 2nd, and that one is open, so there's not a category for that one. So that's
and we don't have a judge yet, do we?
Couple of weeks. We don't. I'm working on that right now. I'll have that lined up here in the next few days.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and go on to tonight's program. What I'll do is I've got the images. Let me pull up my Lightroom here. There we go. that come up?
Yep, we can see your Lightroom.
Right. So these are the images. I'll go ahead and just kind of go from left to right. What I'm gonna do is first open up the first one. I wonder if I should put both of them side by side. Is that maybe the best way to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Highlight them both and just see. Yep.
And then do Shift Tab so you can get up some real estate there. I'll get rid of your side panels. There you go.
Okay. Looks like band in Oregon. Chuck, is this you?
Yep. Band in Oregon it is. So this was, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago now. We were in Bandon, my wife and I and Darren. And this was the very last shot of the trip I took. Like sunset had happened, cloud covered, basically it was finishing off the last of the light, and we were actually walking off the beach. Came around this sea stack, and I was like, I want to shoot these ripples. And so that's what originally caught my eye. And I just basically set up a composition for it. So on the left, obviously, is the raw basic processing. I did just normal, normal run of the mill stuff in Lightroom, nothing drastic. Brought up a little bit of the sharpness in the rock, and did some color balancing, and then used Nick tools and did a little bit of the contrast tool, and I used the sunlight filter. And when I use the sunlight filter, I only use probably maybe 20-30% at most, depending on the image. And it still kind of came out a little flat. And so I was like, I really want this image to work. What can I do with it? So I took it back in the Lightroom and started playing around with sliders. And actually, what the drastic change between the two images is actually the tint slider going more toward the pink side away from the greens. And that gave me the color in the sky and the sand. Other than running that slider, it's basically just a normal everyday processing of an image there was no special things done to it. But the tint slider, I think I ran it up to, I think it was about 50 on the pink side. So it was a pretty drastic slide, but that basically made the image. And this is one of my favorite images from Oregon coast. So, it's pretty amazing when you're tinkering with the sliders, you go drastic just to see what it does, and then work your way back and get it, kind of the way you want. So that's how I did that.
Yeah, that's amazing when you look at the before and after. And you said most of this was Lightroom. This wasn't a lot of other.
No, this was So I did Lightroom. I ran up I did my white balance. I did a little bit of contrast. Drop the highlights a little bit. Bring up just a smidge of clarity, and what's the one right below clarity? I'm drawing a blank now.
Dehaze?
Dehaze, yeah, dehaze.
Dehaze, okay.
I ran dehaze up just a hair, and that was all I did in Lightroom. And then I took it over into color effects.
Got it. Yeah.
And I used the contrast filter just to get a little more detail in the rocks to come out, and it gave a little more detail the reflection popped a little bit more in the ripples right down there at the front.
Yeah.
And then I added a little bit of that, like I said, that sunlight filter. And if you use too much of that, it kind of gives the image like a haze, almost like a fog. And so you got to keep, unless that's what you're looking for, you got to keep it on the low opacity for that filter. And like I said, then I took it back in the Lightroom, and that's when I just messed with that tint slider to give me
got it.
The purples and the pinks.
Did you do any dodging and burning? Because I love the way that white on the bottom of the cliff on the left kind of points me into the middle of the picture, and like, you got these triangles pointing right to the middle. I mean, there's no question that the C stacks are the main topic, because you got everything pointing in. It's fantastic. But on the cliff on the left and then the white parts, I was just curious to see if you actually had done any dodging and burning, because it does look like more intricate colors.
Yeah, on the one on the left, not the white section, because the white actually popped pretty well with the color effects, the contrast. It actually popped that white fairly well. But further up on the rock, I did do some lightening of the shadows, just because that was the rock face that completely was opposite and shadowed from any sunlight, because obviously, the sun's off to the left in this image. And so, yeah, I did play with the shadows in there, a little bit of a dodging to get those shadows to open up a little bit. And I think I also did on that rock that on the right, the C stack on the right, I'm trying to remember. I think I may have dodged that a little bit, just to get more of that texture to pop out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's nice, the detail. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I really like that you took the footprints out of there, made it really simple on the cloning or the whatever.
Yeah.
It's makes a much cleaner image the way you have it. Did those cloning out of there.
Yeah. And so we came around, we came around the back side of the C stack that's there on the left side of the image. And so none of the three of us actually walked into the image. So yeah, cleaning off those footprints on the right was just a quick select and remove. So but once we got to this spot, I was like, Darren, Kathy, back up. I want to shoot this. I was like, don't walk forward.
Well, it is, like you said, it's really nice. The little riffles and so forth with water in them in the front, and to Dave's point in that the leading lines, the other leading line that right away got my attention too is just right there in front of the riffles with the water, the reflecting, so you get that kind of light that's going in there, and even within that you have some of that the shadow that's coming down from that your main, or that that C stack that's kind of right there in the dead center. That one is kind of throwing off a little bit of a reflection down into that water, so it really has a lot going on in it.
Yeah, this is a favorite of mine. We actually have this printed and hanging in our bedroom.
There you go.
Nice. Very nice. And the sky was similar to that color. I mean, you just were able to pull it back.
Yeah. So as the color faded in there, it got more overcast, but you can see, if you look in the raw image on that right C stack, about halfway up, you can see a little bit of sky color in there, just off to the left of that stack. And it was, we had a pretty good color to it, but at this point it had all faded. And so playing with the tint tool kind of brought it back.
Right.
Very, very nice.
Yeah. That's amazing. The before is nice, but that after is incredible.
Yeah. It's amazing. Let me tell everybody, it's amazing what you can do with an image, right? You can, if you really want to get creative with it and kind of play with the sliders, you can get outside of the normal processing and make incredible images too. So
right.
It's ironically when you use the tint slider to boost up your purples or whatever, that's also the perfect way to take a neon green down to something that you can saturate like crazy, so that the green on the rock looks like it's saturating and standing there very nicely. But at the same time, because you use that magenta, it stands out without being crazy neon. So
yeah,
it's kind of a happenstance maybe, but the green looks fantastic just because you were compensating with the magenta.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Bruce, what's the command here? Shift to bring it back to take out to reduce it down.
Yeah, shift tab. Sorry, I was muted. Shift tab. So shift and tab.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. Let's see here. So we go here. Great. Thank you, Chuck. That's
Yeah,
I'll have to keep some of those things in mind. I was going to say, as we were leading into tonight's deal, I was going to say that it was you who, the last time that we did this several months ago, you did that one where you used the high key on that tree image,
Yes.
and you described that. And then I included that in, after that, I did some of my own with that, and I continue to use that technique.
It's a great technique. If you don't really have a, behind the subject, if you don't really, have a really interesting background, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with that.
Right. Not to sidetrack at that, but when you did that, and I was watching the, again, I did that, and I did that with some of my images, and then I even wrote one of those articles about that technique, and I made sure I gave you credit in there on that. But again, the value of this, let's see here, I'm going to go with those two, of this format of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I thought I'd do something a little more Halloween-y. We did this actually this summer. We learned how to make green flames with some chemicals, and then we put these, Corey had actually bought these skulls. They're charcoal skulls. And so it's pretty simple, not as involved as some of the stuff that you guys did, but took the raw image on the right and then ran it through Topaz Studio AI, and then I masked out the skull because the AI one that I used was going to, it affected the skull too much. And then I thought it needed something, so I went out on the internet and found some Terminator eyes to put in it. And just kind of made a fun image. So
again, that's amazing. So on the so when you said you use like Topaz Studio, like on the rocks and that, what I like is, from the original image that you have, there's not all of that texture, right? The rocks look sort of
correct. Well, those were hot coals. So
hot coals. Okay.
Yeah. So what we do is we because these are little charcoal things, and so then we
got it. Okay.
You take borax, with boracic acid and heat, and you mix it together, you can get green flames. It was kind of something that was kind of fun to do with that. And so anyway, yeah, but so that added the texture. The Topaz Studio added the texture, but then I masked out the skull.
Yeah.
So that it didn't have the effect of that Topaz filter. And then like I said, then I found some eyes on the internet and stuck them in there. That's probably the extent of my Photoshop skill set there.
No, it's good though. Those eyes really pop out. That's really nice.
So I was just kind of playing with it a little bit, and I thought, do something kind of Halloween-y. And I liked the green flames. The green flames were kind of what I thought were pretty cool.
And on the skull itself, I mean, when I look at the finished image, you brought in a lot more detail than what was in that, your original raw picture.
Yeah,
just when I look at the teeth, and when I look at
it did the filter did apply to it. I just kind of did the front of it, not the whole back of that skull, because I kind of like the effect it did on that. So. And that's what you do when you have a lot of time on your hands, and you're screwing around in your backyard.
That's good. No, that's nice and a good creative way to do that.
I like the Breaking Bad idea of introducing chemistry into your photography.
Yeah, we do a lot of crazy stuff. This last weekend, we did smoke bombs in pumpkins that we carved, and then we took a BB gun and we're blowing up Christmas ornaments. And we'll see. I haven't had a chance to go through all the images. It was kind of fun. And then we went up to the Russell Gulch Cemetery yesterday evening up above Idaho Springs, and took some like light painting pictures in the cemetery that's up there. And when we were
Oh,
up
nice.
there were these 2 carved pumpkins, and we looked at them, and someone had put plastic in them, so they were people, and they cut the bottoms out so you could put pumpkin heads on. So if anybody's got a desire, they're probably still up there, and you can wear pumpkin heads around the cemetery.
Bruce, can you tell me where I can get where I can buy some of this free time thing that you're talking about?
Free time? Yeah, well, you have to retire, I think, and then I don't know. Sometimes I have time on my hands.
Is that a Lightroom plugin?
Oh, right.
Yeah, yeah, it's a Lightroom plugin.
All right. Let's see. I'm guessing this is a Dave Purcell type image.
Yes, it is. So this was just some back alley in Madrid that I was wandering through, and you can see that I was kind of looking for some street portraits that I could get away with. And this was the middle of the day, obviously, and you can see on the left that you just got a whole group of people walking up the street. There's a car across the street. There's trees that are staked. None of those really added to the story. So, generally I start every single edit in Lightroom the same way, and that's just to hit the auto button. It used to be that I would use each individual slider on the way down and kind of play with it, but I always use as my starting point the auto slider and see where it comes, and it usually does a decent job. And then I'll usually add a little contrast. Sometimes I'll do some saturation. You can see that the building was leaning, so I went down and I in Lightroom used their auto straightening thing, and then I kind of pulled in and out and made the selection the way I wanted. And then I went into Photoshop, and then of course you can just see it was a ton of cloning. The way I kind of like to handle getting rid of people or whatever is first trying to, the same way I did portraits in my talk earlier this year, but I'll use the spot healing tool on a like a darken mode or a lighten mode, just to be a little more specific. And then when it doesn't start removing people or things easily, then I'll go over to the clone stamp, and then I start cloning things out. But usually it's pretty rough, so I'll get it to the point where it's semi good, and then I'll go over to just the normal healing brush, which I use more or less as a mixing brush, and then just start cleaning up the image. I mean, you can see that I had to kind of create the car in the background. I had to create some dark road. With the people, I had to create some of the wall. There's reflections from the window on the left onto the pavement, so I had to get rid of those bright spots. And I just kind of, I actually just instead of just narrowing down the crop, I actually got rid of some of the trees and the person. So I actually created a little bit more road there on the left. And then from there, I started just darkening down the whole image to make it a little bit more moody. And as soon as I eliminated all those people, then you're kind of using the law of odds, or the law of one. I like images that are kind of simple and with just one person in them. She doesn't have the best, pose or anything, but it isn't more interesting with just one person than a lot. So I darkened it down, and then I lit up the light bulbs with a So actually, after I did the cloning, I go back into Lightroom. So then I really start fooling with the tones and the textures, saturation. I lit the light bulbs to make sure it looked lighter, and then took one of those radial gradients kind of in an oblong manner and kind of pointed it from that closest light down to her so that it looks believable that she might be being lit up by that lamppost a little bit. So, and then finally, to get the final color grade, in Lightroom, I went down to the color grading. It's got like a 3-button deal, and it's for like midtones, shadows, highlights, and obviously I've chosen the warm colors for both the shadows and the highlights and the midtones, although I obviously like the shadows are just a little bit more blue yellow than the midtones. So then finally I did just a little bit of a vignette, and that's the difference.
That's amazing, Dave. Hey, real quick before we go into some of the other questions, there's one here on the chat that thank you, Susan, for putting this in there. Is how did you light the light sources? I was going to ask that same thing, but I'm glad Susan asked it.
So in the one of the one of the masks is just a radial gradient, which is just a round button. So I just put just basically a round circle with a good feather on it. And then I took the tint and I made it yellow so that, I lightened it, turned it yellow, and made it round.
With the radial gradient.
Yeah, just with the radial gradient. Now you could have done it with a brush tool, I just happen to like the radial gradient for some reason. And I'll tell you, like down the building, I also pull the radial gradient, like you can see at the second light just behind it. The side of the building is just a little bit lighter there. And then just underneath the lamp, the whole post, up and down is a little bit lighter. If you go to the back alley of that, across the back of the street, that's a little bit lighter. So I was using if you actually looked at my masks, I have just probably about 8 or 10 radial gradients that are trying to drag you through the image with going dark, light, dark, light, dark, light down the building, just randomly highlighting little things. There's actually a less obvious radial gradient at an angle from on the street, that kind of points toward the girl. It's very, very subtle, but everything I'm doing is trying to point towards that girl and drag you through the photo.
We had a question from, what was the process to darken it down to look a little more moody?
I just took the brighten slider and I darkened it.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I guess you could probably take this into like a Nick thing or something else if you have a favorite preset or something like that. For me, I just like to personally do my own color grading, but there's a lot of cool presets in some of those secondary plugins. So that might be another way to kind of handle the moody grittiness. I have to tell you, if I'm denoising something, I always want to do it first and foremost, give it at least one little pass in Lightroom before I send it anywhere, because when you have the full amount of pixels, it tends to clean it up better, even if I do like a AI noise at the end. But in this case, I cleaned it up, I denoised it, I made it pretty, then I got it back and I said it looks better gritty, so I added noise to this picture at the end. So sometimes your final image actually requires, I guess I didn't see that it was going to be cooler and with a little bit of a grit to it. So I have to admit, kind of messing up and cleaning up the noise and then adding noise back in.
Dave, when you say that you take, some of the noise out while you're in the early phase, and I understand like what you're saying is that while you still have all of the pixels and you still have it as a raw image, you're getting some of the benefit of that. Are you doing that? Are you just using the Lightroom noise reduction slider, or are you within
Yeah,
Lightroom?
what I do is Lightroom has a panel called detail. So
Right.
I'll take the sharpen tool and usually I bring it up to maybe about 80%. And then I do a mask. I use the mask slider while holding down the option key.
Yeah.
And generally, if that's about a 60% number, then it's highlighting the edges of say everything in this building, her hair, whatever. So first and foremost, I hit sharpen, and generally, not every time because it's all image specific, but generally I'll be about 80% sharpening, 60% on the mask. And then whatever I sharpen to, if it's 80%, then I'll go down to the luminance thing, which is
Right.
the denoise, and I'll add 20%. Everything that has to add up to 100%. So if I did 90% sharpening, I'll do 10% luminance, 70% sharpening, 30% luminance noise reduction. So for some God only knows reason, I don't know if it's built into the algorithm, but they always seem to look better when those two numbers add up to 100%.
Okay. Interesting. And I mean,
And
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. It's like I said, then I always, if I'm really serious about noise, then I'll use a plugin for the noise too.
Right. No, the thing that I was going to say, just really quickly, that kind of stood out. I mean, when I look at the before and after, the lighting that you did is incredible, and thank you for sharing what you were doing there, because right away I noticed that obviously that all of a sudden on the right side you've got those the lanterns that are lit, and to your point, like what you were describing, the way that you made sure that the areas around those lights are, against the wall and so forth, are lighter than some of the other surrounding areas. And then the other part of it that you were just describing right there, I guess this is what brought that out, but just the level of, detail, when I see how much detail is in the wall, in the in the female who's I guess looking at her iPhone or whatever and so forth down there. And then even the details when I go all the way back to, I'll say that bar building back there. And even like, what almost is kind of blown out over on the original image is that, street where you can see the light is coming through over on that, the road that intersects the sidewalk deal here or whatever. But then when I look at what your processed image is, you've got really good detail, even in that area that seems like there's not that much detail to begin with over on the left, but you really brought that out real well.
Yeah, there's a lot in here that probably would surprise you. Like I wanted it to have like a zebra crossing at the bottom of the building that was not there in the original image. So I actually added the sidewalk zebra crossing, the little white dots. Just
Okay.
little tiny stuff that probably no one would ever notice, but sometimes I get anal retentive about stuff. So
It worked there. Yeah, go ahead.
Dave, did you work on any light on that other block on the back side where the other building is to try to?
yeah, because I felt like
Yeah.
that back building would draw you back through the image a little bit. I actually did a radial filter there, and I toned it yellow
Okay.
because it was a little too, well, you can see in the original image,
Right.
that building back there is stark white and the one in front was more yellow. So by actually toning it a little bit more yellow, it made a little more harmonious, but I lit it up there. So
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, that's amazing what again what you came up with there on
Very nice.
at the end. All right, let's see here. So I'm going to go. Okay, so this is this was mine. So this was it's just about a week ago, out near Almont, Colorado. It's kind of over, you go over the what is it, the Cottonwood Pass, and then if you were going to Crested Butte, which I didn't go that far. I was actually, it was a fly fishing trip, not a photography trip, but took that image over on the left as kind of as we were driving by. I was with my brother as we were driving by. I saw this, these aspens on the left, and while we were driving, I was trying to find a scene that had, kind of that separation of color between some aspens. I wanted to try and find one that just had a couple or whatever, but this was a grouping that was over there. And so I took that one, and then what I did was, I'll kind of go through the process of what I did over here on the right, is I did a lot of the things that others have talked about tonight too. Is kind of started off in the in Lightroom. I made some of those adjustments. I didn't hit the auto button right away like Dave was saying he does, although I do that sometimes. But I just went right into some of the sliders, and but I wasn't real aggressive with those. I just moved the the contrast up, and that kind of made the darks go a little bit darker, and the leaves on the trees go a little bit brighter. I went through and let's see, what else did I do? I took down, usually I take up the shadows, but I wanted to kind of create that separation there. So I pulled the shadows down, and I pulled the highlights down, but just a little bit. And I didn't really do anything there in terms of sharpening, or they kind of have their default sharpening that's over there in Lightroom. So actually I backed off of that. I think it starts off with a slider at like 40 or something like that. And I usually back that down because I'll do some of my sharpening later on. Didn't do any noise reduction in Lightroom. And then what I did from there was I went over to, I just brought it over to Photoshop. And the first thing I did in Photoshop is I did a duplicate layer. And then what I do is I go up to the top layer, and I use the, I got to remember now what they're called, but I do the, let's see, what is that? The blending mode. So blending mode, it starts off being in the normal. And what I did was I switched that to, I usually either go like soft light or overlay. And here I think I did the soft light one. And it comes out like it gives a real strong effect. And what I did then was I brought the opacity down to like 15%, I think, something like that. So it just gave, what it did was, having said that, it gave it a lot more contrast than before I made that adjustment. And then I flattened it. I do that all the time. I flatten them. I usually don't save all those layers that are over there in Photoshop. And then what I did was, similar to what Chuck described earlier, I used the Nik Color Effects Pro, and I opened that one up, and I've kind of created my own recipe within that one, but I'll kind of tell you what's in that. I can even give since I have the Lightroom thing opened up, I can even give a demonstration of it after this. But I use the let's see, tonal contrast is the main one, and the default that they have set to is really strong. So I back down on the adjustments of those sliders. And then I think I also use the warmth / brilliance. And I just, again, I use it very lightly. I don't go too strong with that one. And polarizer. I think polarizer is the other one that I have in that. Kind of my homemade preset, we'll call it that. And so from that, I think that was pretty much what I did. I may have, when I brought it, and while I was still over in Photoshop, I went ahead. Oh, I know the other thing I did. Some of the luminosity masking, and in this case, I was using the TK8 actions, Tony Kuiper actions. And what I did there was I used a and if for those that are familiar with or aren't familiar with the luminosity masking, you can, mask it out based upon the luminosity within your scene. So what I did there was I went into I'm going to call it like a lights 2, I think it was. And what that does is it isolates anything that has a certain amount of light, but then whenever you're making your adjustments, you're just making it to those areas that are, more brightly lit up. And then I took the brush tool, and with kind of a low opacity, I lightened up some of the areas of leaves that weren't popping out quite as much as I wanted them to. And then I also used it quite a bit down there in the foreground. If you look at the before image, the foreground is sort of dull looking and doesn't really have that much color. A lot of that color came through over in the with the other adjustments I made, like the Nik Color Effects Pro. But then to really kind of bring it out and kind of separate the highlights from the shadows within there, I went through that with the luminosity masking. And what I thought was interesting there is it brought out, not just the, the yellows and the leaves and so forth and that, but then now all of a sudden when you look down there at the bottom, what all of a sudden appears are some of those reds, a little bit of purples, a little bit of, the greens pop a little bit more and so forth. So again, it just gave a little bit more interest to that foreground. And then the last step was I went ahead and created that border. And that again was over in the Photoshop. I did the border, and then I did what they call the key line, which is the line that's just inside of the border that separates that from the image itself. And naturally, I also cropped it. You can see that I cropped some of the stuff out on the edges left and right that I felt didn't add to the scene. And that's what I did.
I love that the near camera interest is just really popping out in all the light colors. And I think the net effect of you making those colors pop, you also kind of took the trees in the background more to a bluish tint instead of a yucky brown, and that purplish blue is a beautiful complementary color to the trees. So you're just really making that image, I mean, just in terms of color theory, fantastic. My one question is,
Yep.
Usually you see near camera stuff starts it dark, and you have it very, very light. And I think it's very appropriate here. But my question to you is, if you hadn't put the border around it, would you have made it that light? I mean, because right now with the border, it's just the perfect complement, because you do start out with dark, then you go to light, then the dark, like I said, pulling you through the image. Would you, if you didn't have that border on there, would you have been as light?
That's a good question. I did all of the image before I put the border on there, and the border was, so I when I was doing all my adjustments, I wasn't thinking, okay, after I do this, I'm going to have a border that's going to go dark to a little bit light and then into the scene. So I guess that's a long way of answering. I really wasn't thinking that out loud, but now that you bring it out, I kind of see what you're talking about. But that wasn't my thought process as I went into it.
So many of these landscape images don't have any near camera interest. They're just flat in the front. So this one really, I just love the detail and the saturation and like I said, the contrast of that light to the dark. So it's really like it just pulls you back into it. It's fantastic.
Thanks. And first when I was taking the image and when I was trying to, compose it, again, this is kind of just jump out of the car and take a couple of minutes to figure out if this was going to work or not. I was a bit concerned about, some of the kind of straggly looking trees that are in there, like even like right in the center, right? There's one that's dead. It's like, and then there's a couple of those over on the side. And so when I was taking it, I thought, I don't know that this is really going to have much interest to it. There's too much, I don't know if you want to call it clutter, but some of these other, those distractions. Does it look bad to have a kind of a dead, lifeless tree right in the center of your scene and that? But then as I processed it, to me, I sort of like the way that, sometimes those, aspens that, the bark and the way the light hits it and the way that they get processed, I was okay with that one. And the ones that I'm thinking of in particular are, again, the one that's right there in the middle, and then the one that's up to the far right that's kind of leaning. It's not running out of the scene, but it's a little bit lighter than some of the other stuff around it. So
So something else to add, kind of on to Dave's point
Yeah.
about the border.
Yeah.
For those that aren't into putting borders on their images like that, if you still want kind of the same effect but without adding the border, a fairly strong vignette will also suffice to, basically close the edges of the image and bring you into, kind of fade you into the color too.
yeah, and you can get pretty creative, right, with those vignettes and that too. I mean, they have kind of the standard one that's over in Lightroom, but you can get creative by kind of outlining and drawing and then darkening what areas you specifically want, right?
You can basically, using the tools, you can create your own vignette shape.
Right.
So you can basically draw your shape like the marching ants kind of thing, and then vignette from there too. So yeah, good job though. I definitely like the way that color pops out of the darkness.
Oh, thanks. And actually, one of the things I did, when I mentioned the luminosity masking, I actually went into one of the lighter ones and I darkened a little bit of, some of the leaves look like they were just like a little bit too bright to me on kind of that front left tree or whatever and so forth and that. So I darkened it a little bit. Maybe I should have gone a little bit further with it. I didn't want it to look, unnatural or whatever and so forth and that. So I took it down. I had a little bit too much brightness in that one at one point, but it's, for those that haven't used the luminosity masking in some of your landscape scenes and that, it really is a way to add kind of that, I'll say, three-dimensional, or that I guess that's maybe the kind of the layers and so forth that and I'm by no means an expert on it, but the little bit that I do, I find a lot of benefit from what I get out of that. Those that are really good at it can really make an image pop.
So Tony,
I was going to say the Tony Kuiper luminosity mask obviously are the gold standards, but I'd like to point out that in Lightroom these days, you can do a luminosity mask, and you can do one mask on top of another on top of another. So you can choose one luminosity, play with the colors, play with the saturations, then open another mask, do a slightly different luminosity, and whereas the Tony Kuiper, I mean, he's mixing and matching all the different things. It's a nice, it's fun, it's easy, it's brilliant, but you can, if you don't want to spend any money on that kind of plug-in, you can do it yourself these days with the masks that are in Lightroom.
Yeah, his stuff is kind of complicated for me. I haven't quite figured it all out yet, but I have been using the ones in Lightroom, like you mentioned, Dave, and going in and selecting different areas and just really refining the sliders that they give you to refine the luminance value that you're selecting. Just the nice thing about Lightroom is like it'll give you like a mask overlay in the image as you slowly refine your selection. So you can really kind of get in there and pinpoint exactly what luminance values you want to make the adjustment to.
Yeah, not only that, but if you really start playing with those masks in Lightroom, you can do a luminance mask. And then if you want to fade it or in one direction or another, you can hit the three dots on the far right, do an intersect with a second mask, like I don't know, linear gradient, and then have it fade in or out, or do a brush at a certain opacity. So there's actually a lot of versatility in the new masks.
Dave, do you feel like you could do something in 10 minutes here? We've got some time.
I was gonna say here, what I'm gonna do, if you guys are okay, like I said, and I told Bruce earlier on that I could run this, but we could do it with my image, because what I do is, again, the ones that we sent in and are working with here, like this one over here on the left is a JPEG, right, that I created. But what I did for purposes of this, knowing that we'd probably have a little bit extra time, is I brought the same image over, but the raw file.
Yeah, do it. Let's why not? It's 10 to 8. We got time, and I don't think the police are going to show up and throw us out tonight.
So we can kind of roll through. I can kind of, well, you know, since we have time, this is a good demonstration. I won't do all the cropping and so forth, but I'll start with kind of, and I'll let others, Dave, and others weigh in on what we can do with this, and maybe even just straight here in Lightroom, and then I can even do a real quick demo of that luminosity mask and kind of some of the stuff I did with it. So if I go into, we'll just start with like development mode. Or Dave, do you want me to start and hit auto and see what it does to it?
Yeah, sure. Get to develop and hit auto just for grins.
Start with that, and then I'll go into develop. So this won't be identical to the steps I did, but we'll kind of follow a different recipe here and that, but I can still bring some of those in. So
you hit auto on that, is that right?
I did, yeah. So you can see here now, I hit auto over in the right. So for those that didn't see it, over here in tone control, that's what you're talking about, right? This auto button.
I actually do it in the develop module.
Do you? Okay.
So I'll go to develop, or yeah, you can, and then that top, you're just below, go down, over to the right. There, auto.
Oh, okay. I've never even used that one. I've always used it out of the other one, but I'll hit it here. I guess it does the same thing, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. So you can see here where it just, you know, automatically took the sliders. You can see the histogram is pretty well spread out there.
And just to check that if this in the histogram is spread out, take your arrow on that the whites that you just were at.
Yeah.
I'll go all the way down and then hit the Alt or Option key, hold it down, and then slide back and forth. Yeah, slide, then go the other way. Yeah, you can see where you're picking up your whites. Keep going to the right, further, and they'll emerge. Keep
Oh, I
going.
see it. Yep.
There you go. Now you're starting to see where your whites are blowing out, and then you can do the same thing on the blacks. So you picked your white point there.
Yeah.
And then you do it on the blacks, and you can, you know. Now, what's good about that auto thing is it pretty much takes a true black point and a true white point, which just takes your histogram to the edges. So
Right.
that's why I like the auto button a lot.
It gets it pretty close there. So this was probably a little bit brighter because I know I didn't push my like I say, what I was trying to do is create some separation there of that background. So when I did mine, I didn't push my shadows.
What I have to say is the thing I don't like about the auto button is it always takes the vibrance at +15 and the saturation at -2. And for like people pictures, you don't want that vibrance. So, you know, that's the one negative that I always correct those back down to 0. But and it does usually, like to your point, Michael, it does usually make the exposure a little bright. So I usually bring it down, but it's an excellent starting point.
Right. So I think, yeah, again, when I was doing mine, I was doing this. So you were talking about, did you want to play around with some of the masking in here?
Yeah, just hit that masks. Oh, you've upgraded.
I upgraded. This is the new one that just came out today, right?
Yeah.
So now it gives me a different look to it too, right?
So yeah, it is.
They changed it up a little bit.
Go down to range.
Luminosity range.
Yeah, click on it, and then I believe you take your cursor into the picture, and it turns to a thing. So then you can click on one of those. Yep, somewhere in there. And now you can go over to the sliders. So So you have a red mask on your thing. So that's what's showing up because you have 0 adjustments. But let's just take one of the sliders and move it to saturation up or exposure up or whatever. And we'll get rid of that mask. So you can start playing with that particular thing.
Right.
Let's just take the saturation way up or something like that.
I was gonna
And
say at some
then-
point, let's go back to that slider and demonstrate how you can refine that mask as well.
And that's a good question. So to refine that mask where that was the part that was all red, right?
Yeah.
Let's see.
So click on show your luminance map, that little checkbox. There, so now you can see where that is. So if you play with your sliders up there, so move that slider in the middle, yeah, move that to the right. You see how it's refining that mask?
Right. So
So
now,
now it's only those super bright yellows that you would be affecting with any of the effects that you choose on the lower panel. So if you felt like those yellows were maybe blown out or something, you could bring those down with your highlights or your exposure, probably your highlights, and you get a different effect. So typically, yep, there you go. So now you can kind of
take
work,
that down a little bit.
right. It gives you the ability to work with individual small, smaller luminance ranges.
So now just for grins, let's make it obvious an adjustment. You can click off or let's make the trees a little bit less refined. Let's do most of the trees. So let's take that slider that you were playing with and bring it to the left. Okay, it's good. And then click off the show luminance mask. So now that you've refined it, you've figured it out. And let's just, I don't know, do something really, like take the clarity way up or do something, I don't know, make it obvious. Even the exposure, something really, okay. So let's just say you like it in the trees, but you don't want to have it, well, as maybe we want to fade it from bottom to top. So go back up to your mask now and click on those 3 dots on the right. And then hit intersect mask with, and then pick like linear gradients. So go down, there you go. Click on it and then pull a gradient from like the bottom to the top or something like that. And so what it's doing is, okay, you can stop there. And maybe even hit inverse or something. I'm sorry, yeah, you're gonna have to go take that whole panel and pull it down just a little bit on the, I'm sorry, on the right-hand side where you have the sliders.
Yeah.
Keep going to the right, Michael.
Yeah.
Go down, use that bar on the right. Keep going to the right, just the little slider bar. Yeah, there you go. Now pull it up.
Okay.
Okay, see that?
Got it. Yep. Yeah.
So click invert, yeah. So now if we would have really.
Can you turn on the show overlay so we can see where it is now?
Or hit O on your keyboard and.
There you go.
Okay, so now you have it on
Thank
the
you.
top, but not on the bottom. So like I said, this is a bad example because it's hard to see that with that linear gradient, you eliminated it off the bottom, but you can see how you can intersect masks. Sometimes if you have trees standing out in a sky, you can intersect the luminance mask with a sky, or you can, whatever it is, but just the ability to play with the luminance and then eliminate it in spots or, even with a brush or whatever. So this is exactly why I hate the overlay in red, because you're dealing with the colors that are red. But go to the right, and instead of show overlay, see that red bar there? Click it.
I changed
And then
mine
go to-
recently.
Go down to green and go down to, yeah, and click it. Okay, good. So now take it off. And now hit O key. So, there's so many things in nature that are red that you can see, and it gets mixed up. But I'll guarantee you, this neon is stupid neon green. Nothing is neon green. So you can see your masks, in my opinion, a little bit better by switching your default mask to a stupid color like that neon green.
Something that really you don't see as much out there in nature and that.
Yeah,
so.
I think I changed mine to either like a really bright pink or like a bright purple or something. So
Right.
that's not normally in the images that I shoot.
Yeah, yeah, it's
It's not
exactly
a
right.
landscape- it's
Just
not a
just not
landscape color.
just not red. Yeah. It
So it
red
really-
shows up too much.
Okay.
At any rate, then you can create another mask. And then go again into luminance range. And then then take your cursor into the picture, pick up, yeah, there you go, into
Something
the
darker.
green. Yeah. And then do what Elaine was showing and refine your luminance. So you can just do one after another and have a whole bunch of different luminance masks. Like I said, it isn't as elegant as the fancy one you have, Michael, but it'll work.
Right. No, there's a lot of things you can do with this. A lot of
Mhm.
flexibility you have with that. Let's see. Take that off.
So I have the Tony Kuiper, and
Yeah.
I've used the Tony Kuiper since I think version 5. And Joe Rebel actually got me hooked on them.
Yeah.
Where I was using them on most of my imaging, just to kind of do selective things like this. These ones in Lightroom actually are easier to use than the Tony Kuiper panel. And you don't have to be bouncing back and forth between Lightroom and Photoshop. So
Right.
I've actually gone more this way and using these
Okay.
that built into Lightroom rather than the Tony Kuiper stuff.
I think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you might even have are these in the Camera Raw panel in Photoshop too?
Yes, the Camera Raw engine in Photoshop is basically the same engine that is in Lightroom.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So-
you can use the luminosity masks there as well.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So if you took your image out of Lightroom and then went into Photoshop and wanted to use this type of a skill to refine it, you wouldn't have to come back out into Lightroom and then back and forth into Photoshop. Whereas at one point, all of these functions in Lightroom were not a part of Camera Raw. So,
Right.
5-6 years ago, you had to bounce back and forth
Mhm.
to get some of this, and now you don't have to. So
Right. Yeah, you can just keep making those adjustments over in the Adobe Camera Raw versus the
yeah.
versus the.
And I've been using that a lot lately. I just open it in Photoshop and just go straight to, instead of doing my adjustments in Lightroom, I do them in Camera Raw.
Michael, did you say you used a plugin for yours?
Yeah. So here
Can you show us what you did?
I'll do it real quick. What I'll do is, so I just hit reset. So this, now we're back to where we started. I'll do this real quickly here. I can, it gives us, okay, here we go. Let's see here. I'll do, and what I did was this one right here. Like I said, I took down the highlights a little bit. I think I wanted the separation there. So maybe I even pulled that up. I think I did this. I usually will kind of do like an S curve thing on here. Contrast. I know I boosted that because I wanted to separate those trees from that background. And like I said, this is just going to be a really quick, but more than anything, I usually take the sharpening down on this one. I don't know why it didn't do this for me. Anyways, what I'll do is real quickly here. And I think when I go into Photoshop, I may end up having to like,
By the way, Michael,
yeah, go ahead.
can you go back down to that sharpening
Yeah.
thing and show people,
Oh, what
okay,
you were
so now
describing?
let's just bring the sharpening up, bring it up, yeah, whatever.
And then-
Now go down to the masking and then hold down the Alt or Option key.
Yeah.
And then pull across, and then you are refining your sharpening mask here to see, how much detail you're actually sharpening here.
Sharpened. Okay.
sorry to interrupt there. I just
No,
wanted.
no,
to
no. That was
know.
a good that was a good tip because I don't do that often enough, and I love the detail that you got on some of what you were doing in that. So, um,
And then for me, I go up to noise reduction, and then I'll
Yeah.
up the luminance here. And this is the, if you can knock it down on a full file, even just a little bit, knowing there's better options with plugins.
sure,
This is a good thing to do at least a little bit of noise reduction.
just a little bit here, just to get it out while it's still a raw image, while it has all of that.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of comparisons, and if you knock out just even a little bit here, you're well in front of the game when you go to the plugins, either in Photoshop or coming back into Lightroom.
Let's see here. I'll just do here real quickly. I'll go edit in, and I didn't go into like do a smart object or anything like that, but it should. So do you still see my Lightroom, or do you see Photoshop?
No,
Lightroom.
you did Lightroom.
Yeah, I think I have to stop share and then reshare, I think is what it is.
Hey, Dave, while he's doing that, do you have a place you go to get some of these tips on Lightroom, or you just spend hours and hours and hours figuring it out? 'Cause it's something-
I used to be a big follower of Matt Klaskowski.
Uh-huh.
He does a podcast probably every week, every other week or whatever. And
Okay.
over the years, I've just kind of learned these little things. If anything new comes out, he's
He's the guy to watch.
Blake Rudis also does fantastic
Yeah.
tips on Photoshop and Lightroom. Matt Klaskowski tends to focus on Lightroom. But yeah, I just kind of get on YouTube and pull up one of those guys and see if he's released anything new. And
If you want to learn on luminosity masking, Sean Bagshaw
Yeah.
is phenomenal at explaining it. And he's got a YouTube channel, and he'll do basics, and then he also does all the videos for the Tony Kuiper's luminosity panel. But you can even apply all the knowledge or the technique and the hows and the whys. You can apply it to the Lightroom masking, so you can get those videos and watch them, and it'll really show you how the luminosity masks work, and you can apply that into the Lightroom ones as well.
What was that name again, Chuck?
His name is Sean Bagshaw.
SEAN.
Yes,
Bagshaw.
SEAN. And then you can find him on YouTube. And if you go to Tony Kuiper's website, when you're looking at the panels and stuff, he's also got like the full video series from Sean on like complete workthrough, like a complete workflow on an image, using the panel, so you could see how the panel works. But then, like I said, that those techniques transfer into the Lightroom masking that we just watched you guys do.
Good
Do
tip.
you have my is my Photoshop now showing up there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me see here. I'm gonna do this here real quickly. Is I'm gonna go filter. Oh no, here I know what it is. Layer. I'm gonna do. I'll do kind of like what I described earlier. Is I created that second layer there, and then what I mentioned is I go down to this soft light, which that right there looks a little bit too crazy. But then I take this opacity. I'll take it all the way down. Here's where we started with. Now you can kind of see where I'm getting a little bit more of that contrast. Layer, I'll flatten, and then I can do. You want me to do the Nik Color Effects Pro, or you want me to just jump right into the luminosity masking?
Yeah, go ahead and show the little Nick stuff too.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. It's just
Yeah.
the only thing is it may pop me into where you guys won't see this. I'll have to like unshare screen.
Oh yeah.
but so I'll go into the Nik Color Effects Pro, which of course you probably don't see, but it's coming
No.
up on my screen.
No, we don't.
So yeah, I'm going to do this here real quick. Let me what I got to do here again. Stop share screen, and now where's my
Can you share your whole desktop? That way it doesn't matter what you open up.
Maybe that's the way to do it, huh? Does that show?
Yeah.
You see Color Effects Pro there?
Not yet. No, I see, we can see Photoshop, we see Lightroom behind it.
Yeah,
And
we
then a
we
couple
could see it. It was
things
just behind you. You had to click it to bring it to the front.
Yeah.
Share your old desktop again, and then you should just have to click on the different ones. Or do a shift or a command or shift tab, and you can switch through them. I think. Yeah, so we can see them all. You just have to click on them to bring it to the front.
There you go. Now it's coming over.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Let's see here. Let's pull that over. Okay. So you can kind of see now what I've got here is my Color Effects Pro. So again, they have all their recipes over here, their presets. I've got one that I've created that I just saved here under a recipe. So there's a lot of crazy ones in there. Okay, did that come up?
Mhm.
And here's the 4 that I have on there, and I'll turn them all off, and then you can see which ones do what. The one I think that's the most significant is this tonal contrast. And the bleach bypass I usually don't do. It gets a little bit too bright. But on my tonal contrast, here's the if you pull up just the tonal contrast the way that they have it, these ones down here are what I do is I pulled it down, but they have tonal contrast that these are all up in like 75 and 50% levels and so forth. And I pulled them all the way back down. Saturation is like 6% versus I think it starts off at like 20% or something like that. Anyways, this is what I'll do is here, I'm going to hit, we're going to do this again here.
So on the, let's say before you hit that, under that control
Sorry.
point,
Yeah.
there's there's the opacity slider, so you can control how. That's what I was talking about with mine.
Oh, okay.
How
Okay.
I control how much I want to use. So it's basically got a opacity filter built into it too.
Okay. Okay. Do you see my Lightroom or my Photoshop right now?
Yeah, you're on Photoshop again.
Okay, good. Okay, so that worked. So now you can kind of see the before. That's before I did the nick, and then there's the after. And now I'm going to do real quickly. I'm going to go in and I'm going to flatten it. Let me make sure you can see everything. You can see it all.
We're
Okay,
gonna have
now
to work on Michael's flattening.
I know I'll probably get in trouble for doing that because now I can't go back and fix it, right?
Right.
So here's my this is the panel that I use anyways within TK Actions most of the time. He's got these other ones up here too that have different features in that, but this is what I use the most, almost exclusively. I need to go and watch all those Sean Bagshot things. But I'm gonna hit this and I'll try. So essentially the parts that you see that are lit up here, this is the lights 1, by the way, and I can go all the way through here and click and you can see less and less is showing up as I click from the 1, 2, 3. Those are all your lights. Over to the left side are your darks. So this right here would be, I'd be, really hitting all of that part would be affecting if I were affecting my darks. Same thing as I move to the left. Here I'm back over to lights 1. The other thing too is these 3 here are midtones. A lot of times I will do this. I'll go to my midtones 2. And I'll do a curves adjustment. And now this curve is only affecting the midtones. It's not going to affect the super highlights and the super dark parts, but it's just giving more contrast there into my midtones. And I'm going to go back into this. And now here's where I'm going to do the, like when I said that I, kind of lit up some of the stuff that's down here in the foreground. I'm going to hit this one to where the parts now that I want to kind of light up are it will affect the parts that are lit and it won't affect the others. So again, this is just an example. And then I'm going to go to here. You have this tool here is the dodge tool, and that's a burn tool. So I'm going to go dodge. And then if you look up here in my upper deal here, I've got opacity 100%, flow 17%. That allows me to kind of gradually put in some of the effects. And now I just grab the, and I'm over here on the brush tool, right? So if you look over here on the left, it's the brush tool. And if you look now, if I go through here, you'll see the parts that, if I want to kind of lighten up some of these things down here in the foreground, I can make it like real here. I'm gonna make it look super obvious, but not so good. Here, if I lighten that up, you can really see all of that stuff lighten up. And I wouldn't go this aggressively with it. I'm just doing this more for demonstration purpose. If I wanted to lighten up, now this is going to make these things look way too bright, but if I want to put more light into that area, more light there. Now, again, as Chuck was saying, I can do that, but then if that's, way too strong, I can come back over here on this opacity slider and pull that down. So now you can kind of see, this is essentially at 0. This would be that I didn't do anything with that brush. Now, as I move it to the right, wasn't it doing that? Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Opacity is what I wanted. There you go. Now you can kind of see where that's doing. If I take this off and on, and again, I wouldn't go that strong with those, but that's just more for the example purposes, just to kind of see what I'm doing with it. If I wanted to, again, lighten these trees, not that I would do that, but you can see here where that's doing that. And because it's affecting just that mask. Let's see if I can see that. I was going to try and see if I could just show that mask again. Sure, there's a way to do that, but again, if I'm doing all this, it's not affecting anything over here where it's real dark, because that's not part of your mask. But you can be real selective with this luminosity.
If you I think it's option click on the mask, it'll show you what the mask is.
Right there.
Just option and then click on it.
Oh, what did I do?
No, you got away.
Yeah.
Get back to your Photoshop window.
Is it on the mask? Is it on?
Yeah,
this?
on the gray right there. Yeah, hold option and then click that. It looks like you're floating around. There you go.
Okay,
There.
there's the mask, right? Okay. So again,
Mask again.
yeah, all of those areas that are kind of lighter in color, and to the extent that certain parts are real light and then certain parts are a lighter gray, and then it gets all the way down to dark, whatever adjustments that you make are going to be strongest in the brightest parts of it, not quite as strong in, say, like these areas that are a lighter gray, and then there'll be no effect whatsoever on the darkest parts of the scene. So again, what I did here is not exactly what I did with that image before, because I'm going way too strong with some of this, but more of it, I'm just giving the example of what you can do that. The other part of it too, now, if I wanted to back off of that, I could either go to one of those, the luminosity mask, and go to one of the darker ones and then redarken that. The other thing I can do is, while I'm still in this one, I can go to a black brush and then just take some of that off. And again, I can, change the flow here to where I'm taking less of it off with each stroke, right? Take it down here. And now I'm just kind of backing away some of it, because I wouldn't have gone that dark with it to begin with. So right now, essentially, I'm just going over the mask, but with a black brush. So it's taking away some of the effect that I just did.
Okay, so Dave and Michael, when are you guys going to do your workshop?
After I watch a few more of those Sean Bagshaw videos and learn how to do this better. But anyways, I'll back out of here. I was just showing what the capabilities are there, but you really can do quite a bit with landscape scenes, and I'm sure, other street photography scenes and those type of things with these. I'll stop sharing.
I'll put you guys down for March.
So, but the thing is that what also has been brought up here tonight is that what they're coming out with now and my understanding is that what just came out like literally yesterday, they did some upgrades over in Photoshop, but they also did some upgrades over in the Lightroom that are further refining some of the things that you can do over in the masking. And my understanding is that now even that, like within the Lightroom, they are bringing in some of the AI, artificial intelligence kind of things over into Lightroom also. So.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point now where you can do the complexities of luminosity masking and all the advanced stuff that we were going from Lightroom over to Photoshop to do all these layers and masking techniques. You can do it all now in Lightroom, never having to give up the quality of transferring the raw image in and out of Lightroom, and then using like even taking that native image into the Nick tools. And that way, and I mean, I've got to the point now where, depending on what I'm doing, unless I'm getting like really complex with little details, I can take an image from start to finish and never leave Lightroom and get all of the masking and the luminosity bits that I used to have to bounce back and forth between Photoshop and Lightroom to get. Don't get me wrong, that the TK panels, there's so much more to them than just the masking. There's a lot of shortcuts and a lot of actions that are built into it, so you can click a button and get a layer set up for dodging and a layer set up for burning, and it sets the brushes to presets, and that way you don't have to think about it. You just say, okay, I want to dodge now, and you click the dodge button and it sets the layer up for you and you go right to it. So learning a lot of those tools in Photoshop, it makes that part easier.
Yeah, good. Thanks for bringing that up, Chuck, because what I brought up was just that one single, he's got like 4 panels there that he has up there, and that I just brought up that one that I kind of use mostly for that, lights, darks, and making those types of adjustments in there where he makes it pretty easy. But to your point, I didn't bring up the ones that they look pretty complicated when you open up some of those panels. It's like, what are all those symbols that are in there?
Yeah, my right side of my Photoshop, down kind of that little strip where you had the buttons, I have that expanded, and so like that entire strip is all the buttons and shortcuts. So I bounce through things like there's a flatten button for. I mean, I thought of you several times. Like, oh, Michael needs to know where this flatten button is.
I can save myself 20 seconds per image by. I was gonna real quick
too.
Yeah.
I just do. I just like if I'm, and that they're like, why you're not saving all your things, and it was like, well, shit. Every single time I go back in and redo the photo, I'm thinking about it differently, so I'll never go back to that original set of instructions. So why keep it? I mean, for me. So.
And
Does anybody have any recommendations for videos for Color Effects Pro?
Color Effects, who makes that?
It was
DxO. It's
DxO, isn't it? Yeah.
DxO, yeah, that's who has it.
for those that aren't familiar.
Duh.
I was gonna say real quick, the background on that is, my understanding is that because it used to be a different company that
Google owned it.
Google owned it for a while.
Google bought it from somebody else. And my understanding is that that program used to be like $600, like back before I knew anything about photography. And then Google bought it and they discounted it pretty severely. And then Google made it free. And I was kind of lucky to kind of come into photography right about the time that they did that. So I never paid for it back then. And then Google sold it to this DxO is the company. DxO is the company that has it now. And I think it's it's still pretty reasonable. I want to say it's like $80 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah. And
And-
once you have it, the upgrades are less. I think they'll upgrade, if you upgrade versions, you can jump up to like, I think it's like $50 for the version upgrade.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to point out too is we just showed here the again, for those that aren't familiar with that program, but I showed the Color Effects Pro. There's like 4 or 5 programs in there. The other one that's in there that I use quite a bit is the Silver Effects Pro.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so for black and whites, it's, I don't want to say it's the industry standard, but almost everybody seems to that I know seems to use that for their black and white conversions, and it's pretty slick for that. So if the $80 isn't worth it for the Color Effects Pro, by the time you throw in the Silver Effects Pro, it's kind of worth getting.
Kathy, to
There
answer
aren't
your
very-
question, Nick, DxO does videos. They have like their pro photographers they have that represent their brand. Those guys do videos to show like all the features and all that stuff. So yes, they do have, DxO does have videos on how their stuff works.
Yeah, I'll take a look and get that to you, Kathy. I'll take a look there. Yeah, I should have showed some of the examples that I do, but there's a lot in there that can enhance an image.
Yeah.
Naturally, you could probably do everything I did in that Color Effects Pro with Photoshop, but it would take a long time to get the same results.
Yeah, there aren't very many images that I take in the Photoshop that I don't at least run through some of the color effects to see if there's something that I think will give it a little extra push.
That
If
tonal
not-
contrast one, that's the one I use on my images too. It's like I was talking about getting the ripples in the sand to
Yep.
kind of pop a little more. It's the tonal contrast one that's I use for that.
The pro contrast I use like almost everything. I mean, it's great for really giving that extra pop, the tone contrast, and I use some of the sunlight
Mhm.
filter to get to warm things up just a little bit.
Yep, there's one that's like a warmth brilliance one that's in, and they have a
Yeah.
lot of the different.
I have a lot of stuff. There's a lot.
Yeah, we could
That's its own day long
we could have a whole.
adventure.
And Kathy, to go more to your point about the videos to watch, if you get the plugin, it's fun to just sit in there and like you open up Color Effects and there's all the presets basically down the left-hand side, and it kind of works like it's kind of like a Lightroom slide to it too, because you can pick one of the presets and then play with the sliders on the right. And so you can kind of say, oh, I kind of like this preset, but it's a little too strong. Okay, you can kind of tinker with it to get it more your liking. But it's a very visual program to where you just click through the presets and you can see what it'll do to your images.
Well, and the other thing with is there are some basic masking abilities within the color effects option that you choose. But the other thing that you can do with it is you can also, like, once you get it back onto its own layer in Photoshop, you can manipulate the opacity on that layer or apply a mask and manipulate the effects from the with the mask in Photoshop itself too.
Yep.
That's a good point. Is a lot of times I will do that. And I'll go a little bit too strong with something like that, and then because it is a layer in Photoshop, then if I go too strong with it, then I'll move that opacity slider back and forth to where it looks like it's right. I probably still go too strong with it too often, but I at least attempt to do it that way.
I had a magazine shoot. It was a 70s shoot. And to Michael's point where he said, if you buy it for color effects, it's got silver effects. Well, the 70s shoot needed a little extra oomph. They kind of dressed up in 70s clothing and earrings and whatever, but analog effects as a package of light leaks. So you have these crazy old film camera light leaks that look like it's just straight out of the 60s, 70s. So, it's just yet another little package that I really hadn't played with until I did this little 70s thing. So, yeah, Michael makes a good point. It's got a lot of oomph for its money.
But anyways, that's what I was going to show it.
Well, we ready to call it a night?
Yeah, that was that was good. And thank you, Dave, Chuck, and Elaine, and everybody else for contributing to. Again, I learned a lot tonight just on all of the the discussion on your images, but also just kind of I think it made sense to kind of walk through just one image like that and just bounce back and forth. I learned a lot more tonight about some of those things that can be done in Lightroom when it comes to masking and some of those adjustments that I've done a little bit of that, but now I know I can probably not always have to go into the Photoshop to do those things. So it's great.
I'm going to answer Gary's question real quick. It's a strong no. Because he asked, so do you think now you can convince Darren to use Lightroom?
Oh, no.
No, because so Darren uses Adobe Bridge, which is basically the Adobe Camera Raw engine with basically just like a real dumbed down. You don't have the cataloging of Lightroom. And
Right.
so it's basically Adobe Bridge is like a visual, for those that don't know, it's like a visual window for all your images in your hard drive. So it doesn't build a catalog. It just shows you what's on your hard drive or your disk. And then the Adobe Camera Raw engine is built into that. And so a lot of the stuff that we did tonight with the luminosity masking and all that is already built into that Adobe Camera Raw engine. So no, you still probably won't see Darren in Lightroom.
But he's using from an editing standpoint, like you said, if he's using Bridge or if he's using Adobe Camera Raw, he's essentially using a lot of the same things for his
Yes.
editing. And now
Yeah.
he'll then go into Photoshop and he'll do some of those other things. But he like you said, he's missing some of the cataloging and some of the other kind of things that I sort of rely on Lightroom quite a bit for that. But,
Yeah, that's the one piece that he's happy not using the cataloging feature, and so that's why he stays with Bridge. So
Right,
I don't know if
right.
he watches this, he's going to get a kick out of that. So he's taking Gary. He'll probably tell you more about it.
right. As far as what his reasoning is for that. But like I say, essentially is from an editing standpoint, he's probably using some of the similar things that we are in Lightroom, just as far as the same sliders, the same, all of those things. And that is my guess. So
Yes, it's the same engine. So yeah, he's using all this, basically all the same tools.
right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll let everybody go, and our next meeting will be on the 2nd of November. It'll be competition night.
Yep. And so more to follow on that one. We'll get that out here pretty soon.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah. have a good
Yeah.
night.
Thanks for
Tom.
joining, Tom. Yeah. Good to see you.
Night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
All right.